All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. All right. Looks like we got one question in there to start. So we'll start here with Russ. So Russ asks, do you have any suggestions for keeping in your posture when you have a side hill lie, feet below the ball? Well, I mean, you're really not going to stay in your posture, right? You're going to have to be more upright when the ball is above your feet, right? So you wouldn't want to push down when you do that, because then you're just going to get too close to the golf ball. So my advice or my suggestion would be to not to kind of be more upright and just stay upright throughout the swing if the ball is above your feet. All right, keep the questions coming. Just as a reminder, we won't have office hours tomorrow. We'll be back Monday. So Matt C says, what is a indoor sim best suited for, and what things are not? What is an indoor sim best suited for? I guess it would be best suited for people who don't have the ability to maybe play golf in the wintertime. So if you play somewhere, or if you're somewhere where it's snowing, this time of year, or it can snow, or it's too cold, it can be beneficial to have a simulator where you can have a climate controlled area where you can still hit balls and continue to work on things. I think it's definitely good for that. It's good for fun. If you're just kind of looking to hang out with some friends and kind of not have to go to the golf course, right, to hit balls and stuff like that. It has its limitations, though. It's not, it's simulated golf, right? It's hard to make it. Hitting off of a mat is just hard to simulate. What would actually be happening on the golf course, right? You can chunk a shot off the mat and it won't make much of a difference. You do that on a real golf course and it can make a huge difference. So there's definitely some limitations there. But yeah, I mean, I've hit on plenty of simulators. We have a simulator, in the office where we make our videos and stuff. And we sorry, I just want to make sure that we are. Sorry for the echo. I was trying to make sure that we are good to go for today. But yeah, I mean, it's just a fun tool. I wouldn't look at it as something that is something you have to have in order to get better, right? It's definitely not. I would much prefer going to an actual driving range, even if I'm hitting off of mats at a driving range. I mean, in the best case scenario, you'd be hitting off of grass, hitting Pro V1s, or whatever golf ball you play, right? You'd be hitting good golf balls, and you would be seeing the ball flight, right? That'd be like the perfect scenario, right? But not everyone has that ability, so you kind of have to find what you can do, right? So if you're somewhere where it's winter, right, you can't you can't have that, or it's going to be freezing maybe, but you're not going to be able to have that. So having something that's indoors and something where you can see your ball flight and things like that is definitely better than not, sure. And they're getting more and more affordable, right? There's definitely they're getting more and more affordable. There's also more options. It's definitely getting better. So Matt C asks, I noticed that I hit fades less far than draws and with more vertical launch angle. Is this common? Yeah. So what you want to understand is that when you hit a fade, the face needs to open to the path of the club. And when the face opens, it adds loft, right? So you're going to hit it higher and you're not going to hit it as far generally, right? With a draw, right, the face needs to be closed to the path of your club, which de-lofts the face a little bit. It's going to go lower, and a lot of times it goes farther. So yeah, it's generally, all things equal, generally a draw is going to go farther than a fade. Um, so some people might say, well, why does anyone hit a fade then, right? Because it's not going to go as far. Why do we see big tour players, like Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka? We see these professionals. They hit the ball a long way and primarily hit fades. Well, they hit what I would call is a power fade, and a power fade is where you actually get more shaft lean with a fade by getting the hands more forward at impact, right? And then you're kind of offsetting what what's the loft that's being added by opening the face, right? So you're getting the handle more forward. That de-lofting with the handle more forward is offsetting the loft that's being added by the face being open. So those players are hitting more kind of power fades, and for them it's easier to control, right? That's not really the best route for most players. I generally think most players are going to do better primarily hitting draws because they just go farther and they're not hitting it far enough to like lose control of it, right? It's not because they're hitting a draw because they don't have control of it, right? It's because if they were hitting fades, they would not have control of it either. So it's more. I generally recommend hitting draws for most players because it's a more powerful shot. It's going to be easier to control for those players. Most players. Now, obviously, there are some players that maybe are better off hitting a fade. It's more comfortable for them. They control it better, whatever it might be. But all players can do both. So, Dustin Johnson primarily hits fades, most of the time, but he can hit both. He can do either or, right? So you need to be able to do both. Now, some players work the ball both ways. Tiger did that. Adam Scott. There's a lot of players that work the ball both ways. Justin Thomas does that. Um, you know, but you can have a typical ball flight. Like I personally, I like to hit draws, most of the time. A little bit of a fade with my driver, but I mostly like to hit draws with my irons. But when I need to, I'll hit a fade. If the shot calls for it, I'll hit a handful of fades every round, typically with an iron. With the driver, I'll hit a draw if I need to, but primarily, like I said, I'll hit draws, or excuse me, fades. Not always, but that's just the way I am. That's what works the best for me. And you might be asking, well, why would you hit draws with your irons primarily and fades with your driver primarily? It's because of the path of the club, right? So when you hit an iron, the ball position's more toward the middle of the stance. Your path is going to be more from the inside, more conducive to a draw. When you hit a driver, the path or the ball position's more forward. The path tends to get a little bit more left. So for me, it's just easier to hit fades. So that's just me. Some people would rather hit draws with their driver and everything. All right, keep the questions coming. But you guys come up with questions. I'm going to be doing some of my other work. So Russ says, "Did I miss the answer to my question?" Uh, I'm guessing you did. If you're just hopping on here now, is the first question. So I already answered it. If you want to see questions that have already been answered, all you have to do is watch the archived office hours. The short answer to your question is you're not gonna stay in your posture because you're gonna be more upright because the ball's above your feet. So you shouldn't try to necessarily stay in your posture. You're gonna be more upright because the ball's above your feet. So Russ says, when the ball is above my feet, I tend to choke down on the club and then end up topping the shot. Should I not do that? You can choke up on the club. Yeah, that's fine. Um, I would just try to feel the club swinging around more around your body, right? When the ball's above your feet, the club's going to be more going more around your body, almost like a hula hoop, right? It's going to be going more around your body. So I would just try to feel like the club's more around your body. It'd be hard for me to say why you're topping it without seeing your swing, or without seeing it. But yeah, you can choke up on a little bit, use extra club, choke up a little bit. That's fine. But yeah, just try to feel the club swinging more around your body. So John G says Q. I'm guessing he's got a question coming up. All right. So John G says, is there a simple way to determine if the club face is square and not closed at address? Um, I mean, the simple way. I guess I don't understand the question. Um, I guess you just kind of look at it, and if it looks square, I would kind of look at the leading edge of the club, right? So I kind of look at this part of the club. If this part of the club is perpendicular to the direction that you want to hit it, then that would mean that it's square. But it's really not that important how square or open the face is at address. What's most important is at impact, right? That's really where it matters. So I can have the club face super open at address and then come to impact and square it up, right? Or vice versa. So just because I have it square at address doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen at impact. So just set up in whatever way gets you to have this club face square at impact, because that's where it really matters. Maybe I'm not understanding the question, but all right. So John P says the TSG 5 main fundamentals have helped me improve. Thank you. I noticed shallowing is not one of the 5. You could call it the 6th, really. And you could call speed the 7th. You could kind of do that if you want. But yeah, you don't. It's not a necessity. There are some tour players that don't shallow out the club, but an overwhelming majority, like 90, probably 99%. I take that back. All tour players are shallowing out the club at some point in the swing, but some are coming down steep in the beginning of the downswing and then shallow it later. Not ideal for most people. An example of somebody would be Phil Mickelson, but not everyone is as skilled and coordinated and as athletic as Phil Mickelson. I know Phil Mickelson may not look like it, but he is a world-class athlete. Very, very good. So I'm pretty sure had he, devoted his effort and his time to any sport like he did golf, he could probably be pro, right? Had he done it from a young age. Like obviously he couldn't just get in the NFL now, right? Or something like that. But had he had the same passion, you know, as he did when he was younger for football or baseball or whatever, or basketball, he probably could have played at a very high level because he's just an extremely good athlete with very good coordination. He chose golf. So not everyone's going to be in that area. So yeah, shallowing is definitely something that we see all players do, especially in the beginning of the downswing. It goes on to say, I also notice some tour players like Tom Watson don't seem to shallow. Tom Watson, every single tour player shallows the club. It's just a matter of when, right? And think about it. When players are on one plane, they are also shallowing out the club. It doesn't have to be. What we have to understand is that shallowing doesn't have to be a crazy laying off of the club move, right? If you look at Tiger's swing, look at Adam Scott's swing, right? They're not going up to the top and then going like that, right? That's not what they're doing. They're going up to the top, but this club is coming down on a shallow angle to the golf ball, right? So we talk about that consistency cone, right? Every single tour player has that club working down at some point is getting underneath that line, that getting into that consistency cone. There's not a single player that isn't. If you're shallowing out the club, then you're going to be in that consistency cone. Every single player, whether you're Tom Watson, Phil Mickelson, Tiger, or players that have a crazy, a shallowing move in the swing, or like a big time shallowing move in the swing. So like a Joaquin Niemann or trying to think of some other ones. Colin Morikawa, right? There's lots of players that have these kind of more shallowing moves in the swing. Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, all these players have a shallowing move in the swing. So yeah. Now Tom Watson's very upright, right? And he's shallowing out the club coming down. That is kind of how I swing. My plane cuts through between the trail, elbow, and shoulder. What will I gain by further shallowing out the club? It sounds like you probably are. I mean, your ball flight's going to tell you whether you're shallowing out the club or not. If you're hitting big slices, right, cutting across the ball, you're probably not shallowing out the club. If you're having trouble controlling your ball flight, you're probably not shallowing out the club, right? But if you control those things really well, have good control of your low point, you're probably shallowing out the club. If you're coming down the consistency cone that we talk about, then you're good to go. There isn't any further shallowing you have to go. In fact, if you can over shallow out the club, right? We can get the club too much from the inside, and that can lead to blocks and hooks and things like that. So we want to shallow out the club a certain amount. If you're already shallowing, it's redundant to shallow it anymore, right? So John G says, when I look down at the club face, it appears closed. Have played that way for years, tend to hit low and some left. Is there a simple fix? Try setting up with it more open. I mean, like I said, the address position doesn't matter in the sense that you're not hitting the ball with your address, but your address sets up your backswing, that sets up your transition, then sets up your downswing, and then your impact, right? So you want to set up in whatever way allows you to get the club to the ball in the best way possible. So it's possible that if you set up with the face more open, you may come into impact with the face more open. But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to happen. You may set up with the face more open and then actually come back to impact the exact same way you always have, right? So it's just a matter of tinkering around with it. I'd maybe weaken your grip a little bit. I'd have to see your swing to know other things that you can do. But yeah, I would try maybe just setting up with the face open, or maybe feeling the face more open throughout the swing. Try to feel like you're trying to get the ball to start to the right, assuming you're right-handed. Right, those would be the things I'd be trying to do. So Kerry says Clay's recent video on greenside bunker play suggested opening the face and swinging very fast. Would this technique also apply when using a lower lofted club from a greenside bunker, such as pitching wedge or 9-iron? Yeah, if you're trying to hit a bunker blast shot, yeah, for sure. A lot of people ask me, like, how would I hit a longer bunker shot, right? If I have my highest lofted club and I can't hit that very far, right? I can only hit that 10 yards out of the bunker. Well, what happens if I have a 20-yard bunker shot? How do I just have to leave it short? What you would do is you just take whatever the next club is, or maybe even 2 clubs, right? So you just hit it the same way. Now it's going to come out hotter and faster because there's less loft, but you would hit it the same way, right? You could hit a bunker blast shot with a 4-iron if you really wanted to, right? You can just lay the face open. Now it come out hotter and faster, right? But you can absolutely do that. So Russ S says, I think you just hit the nail on the head for me in the previous answer. I set up square with some forward shaft lean, but I must not get to that position and flip some. So then the face will be closed, explaining the overdraw I often get. Yeah. So it's definitely possible. Yeah. Jeff M says, Q, how short do you have to be before you think about getting your clubs cut down for a better fit? That's just something you would have to get fitted for. You got to think, golf clubs are made for a normal height individual, an average height individual. So someone whose average height is going to be 5'8" to 5'10", somewhere in that area. So if you're below that, it's possible you may either want to get your clubs flattened a little bit, the lie angles flattened, and still have them the same standard length, or get them shortened a little bit, right? Because if you have a longer club, right, then you may benefit from it being flattened if you're shorter, right, or shortened, right. So you just have to get professionally fitted to know for sure. But there's no set height. There's also, some people are short and have short arms, right? So it doesn't really make any difference. Some people are short and they have longer arms, or shorter torso and longer legs, and stuff like that. So everyone's built a little bit differently. There's nothing like, you're 5'5", so you have to have this length clubs. Doesn't quite work that way. Everyone's individual. Someone who's 5'5" could have longer arms, shorter legs, and their hands are a lot lower, right? And someone who's 5'5" could have longer legs and shorter arms, and their hands are just as high as someone who's 5'10", right? So there's no height where the cutoff is, right? You just have to get professionally fitted to know for sure. So John P says, thanks, Q, for answering my question. No problem, John. Glad to help. You mentioned in your response the consistency cone. What is the consistency cone? Some TSG instruction shows the downswing plane through the trail elbow. I'm not that shallow. This is what led to my question. Yeah. So basically, the consistency cone would basically be a cone that is around that line that you're talking about. What you're talking about is the elbow plane line that goes from the hosel of the club up through the elbow. That's generally what I like to use, and I like to see the club get a little bit under that elbow plane all the way down to the golf ball. For a driver, a little bit more, because the ball positions more forward with the driver, so we actually need to shallow out the club a little bit more. So if you're coming down above that line, then you're steep. So what you would benefit would be, I would assume, coming down above that line, then you probably hit pulls, you probably hit pull draws, you probably hit fades, right? So if you want to compress the ball more, hit some draws, hit some more powerful shots, I'd work on shallowing out the club by working through the 20-minute shallowing fix course. But Tom Watson is coming down underneath that elbow plane line. Every single tour player at some point in their swing is coming down underneath that elbow plane line. Now that doesn't mean that. So what a lot of people will do is they won't realize. So that's relative to your toe line, right? So if you're someone who hits straight shots and comes down above that line, right? The club's coming down above that line. Then what you're doing is you're just aiming your body to the left and pulling the ball. Is basically what you're doing, right? That's a slippery slope. It gets a little bit harder to control when you do that. All right, we got about 30 minutes left. Keep questions coming. So RD says, how can you overshadow the club to practice the exaggeration? Yeah, so basically what I try to do is just try to swing as much to the right as you possibly can. So just try to get the club as far behind you as you possibly can. That would be overshadowing out the club. Ideally, what we talked about earlier, right? The elbow plane line. Ideally, we would just want to get that club, for on the course, right? We'd want to get that club working down that consistency cone, working just underneath that elbow plane coming down, right? I don't remember exactly how to draw the consistency cone. I feel like it's hosel the club up through maybe the middle of the hip and then maybe the bicep area. I think that's kind of where it is. But if we're getting down to the nitty gritty, making it tight, like where the club needs to be, if you draw the elbow plane line, first you have to make sure that the camera angle is good. You got to be down the toe line. You can't be down the ball line. That's going to give you a skewed view. Whether you're looking at the elbow plane or the consistency cone. But hosel the club up through the point of my elbow here. I want to see that club tracking just underneath that all the way down. That would be like where we would want it on the on the course. But in your practice, if you're someone who's coming down steep, you're having trouble, you're coming down steep, that's what's happening on the course, right? Then I would really try to exaggerate. I try to feel like you're as much underneath that line as you possibly can, right? So it's just swinging as much to right field as you possibly can if you're right-handed. All right, so we got a couple questions came in. So Jeff M says, thanks for the info on club length. Our club pro said I need them bent down 1.5 degrees after putting tape on the irons and having me hit a few of them. So I'll have him do that. As for chipping game, what loft club should I be hitting for chips out to 25 yards? So again, it's another question where there's no set thing you have to do. A lot of it depends on your skill level, what you're comfortable with. A lot of it depends on the shot. Generally, if you really struggle from this range, a lot of people will pull like a lob wedge from this area. In fact, I just earlier this morning I was playing with a friend of mine came to visit with his son. His son just started playing golf. He's like in high school. Just started playing golf like a few months ago, and we're 25 yards out, and he's grabbing his lob wedge, right? And and he's chunking and thinning it, right? It's just if you haven't built the skill to know how to control the bottom of your swing very well, you're just making things harder for yourself because a lob wedge has a very sharp leading edge on it, right? So this isn't a lob wedge. This is probably like a 50-degree wedge. But the more loft we have on it, the more this edge right here, the sharper it gets, and the more it wants to dig. So the more precise you have to be with where you're hitting the ground. So unless you're skilled and you have the savvy to know how to use the bounce of the club and how to control the bottom of your swing, because even if you know how to use the bounce, there's still limitations, right? But if you know how to do these things and know how to judge a lie, to know, okay, can I use the bounce? Or because if you're playing in really wet conditions, it's going to be difficult, even if you control the bounce really well, or even if you have a good control of the bottom of your swing. If it's wet conditions, that ball is going to want to dig, or that club's going to want to dig into the ground. You're just asking for a chunk or a thin shot, right? So in those situations, a lot of times it's better to take, if you can, to take a club that you can roll up to the green, right? That you can roll the ball up to the green. You can land it short and it can hop on, because you'll hit 10 shots. You could hit 10 shots from that area, and your average shot's going to be quite a bit better than, maybe occasionally with the lob wedge, you may hit a really good one, and that's what keeps you coming back. But you're just setting yourself up for, your worst shot with, taking the lower lofted club and rolling it up there is typically going to be a lot better than your worst shot with the wedge. A lot of times, you chunk the wedge, it's only going to get halfway there, right? Whereas if you chunk the 8-iron a little bit, you're still going to have, you may even still be on the green or whatever it is. So a lot of it just depends on your skill level. Again, there's no set club that you hit. If you're very skilled with the wedge and you're really good with it, then hit the wedge. That's 100% fine. If you're in a situation where you got to hit, you got to carry it, there's no landing it short, you have to carry it, then you kind of have to use the wedge. And I would just try to aim for the fat part of the green if you can, if you're not super highly skilled with it. Don't try to land it in an area that's this big. It's hard to do that. So yeah, there's no set club. Even for me, for 25 yards, there's a lot of scenarios that I could hit, right? If I have a lot of green in front of me, right? Let's say that it's a 25-yard shot, but I only have 8 yards of grass in front of me, and then the rest is green, 17 yards of green. I'm not going to hit a wedge. I might hit a pitching wedge, carry it halfway there, and just let it roll the rest of the way. That's going to be a much higher percentage play, even though I'm skilled enough that I can throw down a wedge. I know how to control it and hit the same shot, but it's just not as good a higher percentage shot, right? It could, if I have 2 yards of green and the rest, or 2 yards of grass and the rest is green, I might hit a hybrid from that situation, right? If I have, if it's really, really flat, and let's say it's 22 yards of grass, right? And then, it's a few paces on, so I don't have a lot of green to work with. But if it's all flat, right, then I still may roll it up there. Now, if it's up on a hill and maybe I got to carry a bunker, and I'm short-sighted or whatever it might be, yeah, I may hit like try to hit a spinny lob wedge up there. So there's lots of options. There's no one thing, right? So It's just something you got to practice. How I know all this stuff, or part of how I know this stuff, is I learned by doing, right? So I just put myself in these situations. Hopefully you have an area where you can practice these things, and you can practice these situations. Like, okay, if I'm in this kind of situation, what kind of shot can I hit? And try to hit different shots, and then you'll find for yourself what works the best. But yeah, there's no one, and even if you have, um, you know, uh, a 25-yard shot, there's probably several ways you could play it, right? Even if the same shot, even, let's say it's 50% grass, 50% green, there's lots of ways you can play that, right? You could, hit an 8-iron and try to bump it up there. You could hit a pitching wedge and carry it a little bit farther and land it a little bit softer, bump it up there. You could hit a wedge and try to spin it. You could hit a little lower lofted wedge and spin it a little bit less and carry it a little bit less, right? There's so many options, right? So there's just not one way. So RD says, when the full spine is tilted, does it tilt back the other way, or does it stay in the same tilt? You just rotate it around it. So let's talk about the spine tilt. So at address, I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but I think if I answer this way, it'll maybe cover what you're looking for, right? So at address, I'm going to have my spine tilted slightly away from the target, right? As I turn to the top, and when we're talking about spine tilt, it's not really, we probably shouldn't call it spine tilt, to be honest. It's more the overall angle of your torso, right? Because our spine is curved and it rotates, right? So the upper part of our spine rotates, the lower part of our spine is pretty stable, but it's still rotating because your hips are rotating. So that pushes your spine kind of toward the target as you're going up to the top. So, our spine is going to be kind of curved in that way. But the overall angle of our body is really what we want to look at, right? So if I take this, put it on my body, and then tilt my body, right, my torso, angled away, that's where I want to be. At the top of the swing, I want to basically be in that same body angled away. My spine is moving. My spine's turning and moving, right? Because I'm turning my shoulders, I'm tilting my shoulders, right? My spine's also doing this as I go up to the top. So it's rotating and it's also going like this, because if I didn't do this, have some side bend in my spine, then I would just go to this like this at the top. The top of my swing would look like this. And I want to be in my posture, right? So our spine is turning, bending, it's tilting, it's moving around, right? It's our body that we want to focus on, right? So if you look on video, what you'd want to do is draw 2 lines outside of your torso. So kind of from the hip to the shoulders, right? And I'd want to see that slightly angled away in that 6 to 8 degree range. When I go up to the top, I want my body to remain within those lines. And I want my body to be pretty close to that same angle. Now, if it's a little bit more angled away or a little bit less, it's typically not a big deal. It may depend. If you're someone who's angling, getting a little bit angled toward the target at the top, and you're having a hard time shallowing out the club, then typically getting more angled away at the top can help you to shallow out the club. But it really just depends. If you're already shallowing out the club and your spine is not quite angled away the same amount at the top, then that's fine. Really, it just depends on what's going on there. So I got these lines drawn, right? I'm going to go up to the top of the swing, and my body's going to be within those lines. Typically, I'm going to be a little bit more toward the trail line, right? So my body, a lot of times, my body will pretty much be on that line, and there may be a little bit of space between my side in that line. Because as we turn our body, it gets a little bit narrower, right? My shoulders are wider this way than they are that way, right? So typically on video, it's going to look a little bit narrower, right? Now, as we come down into contact, that overall angle of my body is going to get more angled away, right? So I'm going to be angled away 6 to 8 degrees. I go up to the top. Again, I'm going to be angled away about 6 to 8 degrees. And then when I come into impact, I'm going to be more angled away in that 18 to 25 degree range. But my spine is turning, right? It's doing this, and it's doing this in the backswing and this in the downswing. All right, so let's keep going. So Ron says, there was a recent video where Clay demonstrated the takeaway using an alignment stick up to about waist high. I tried that today, but not getting it. Do you keep the alignment rod against the body until waist high. It quite a different takeaway if that is true. Yeah, so basically, what you're talking about, I assume the drill that you're talking about is the one where he's got the stick like this, and then he kind of brings it up, and the stick is still on the kind of on the leg there. Yeah. So if you're coming off of it, there's a couple of things that may be going on. One, you may be pushing your hands out away from you too much, right? So that could be what's going on. And the other thing that could be going on, maybe you're not pushing your hands out away from you too much, but you're rolling the club inside, right? So that drill is really good to help you to not push the hands out away from you too much in the backswing, and also for you not to roll the club inside, and also to help you bring it out wide, right? So if I just kind of, if I'm here and I just kind of pick it up, right, then it's going to come off my body, right? So I want to come back. I want to bring the club back wide, right? So that's going to look like this. It's going to be nice and wide. This club is on my hands. I want to have my hands kind of going more in, the hands more in, right? And I want to have the club a little bit more out, right? So that's kind of the a good takeaway position. Now, it's not. Here's the thing about the takeaway. I'd only change it if it improves your ball flight contact. If it improves, what's happening, in your swing, right? We don't want to just change the takeaway to change the takeaway. If you're struggling with getting the club to work down in the proper way in the downswing, let's say that your hands are going out, the club's going in, you're rolling the face open, then you get up here, and then you come over the top. That drill is going to be really, really good for that person. In fact, I have some students that work on that drill that are doing that exact same thing. I definitely have students that go like this, right? And then come over the top. Now, if you're someone who goes like this, and then you bring it up here, and then shallow it out in the downswing, I'm not giving you that drill because it's sure your takeaway may look a lot better, but now you got to figure out a new way to bring the club down, right? Because you were bringing the club down really well, doing a poor takeaway, but you were making adjustments in your downswing that allowed you to hit the ball really well. And there's nothing wrong with that. Raymond Floyd brought the club hands out, club inside. Actually, his hands were probably more in, but he brought the club way inside, and he won major championships doing that. So it's not like you can't play good golf if you bring the club inside. It's a matter of what you do in your transition, in your downswing when you do that. If your backswing is leading you to do things that are really bad in the transition and in the downswing coming down to the ball, then altering your takeaway can definitely help with that, because you're looking at that as the root cause. So I'd be careful. If it's something that's really foreign, you said this is quite a bit different. If that's true, like you're probably doing this drill and thinking, if this is the way I got to bring the club back, this is crazy, right? It probably feels way off. Then I wouldn't even explore changing it if you're not coming down in the wrong way. If you're bringing that club down in a really good spot, don't worry about your takeaway. It is fine. I have lots of players that come to me, do online lessons, and they're so worried about their takeaway, but they got this club coming down beautifully, right? Well, if we change the takeaway, then that's going to change where this club is in your transition. You got to learn a new way to bring it down to the ball. So it's not worth it, right? Because really at that point, you're just doing it to make your backswing look a certain way and to look, what you think would be better, right? When in reality, it's not. You're playing golf swing instead of golf at that point, right? So if your goal is to shoot lower scores, to play better golf, then I'd only mess with your takeaway if and only if it is leading to poor transition downswing impact, right? That's the only reason I do that. If you're someone who's bringing the club inside and you're shallowing it out beautifully and the face is in a great position, then don't mess with it. It is 100% fine. Work, tweak things that directly improve your ball flight and contact. All right, so JP says, hello, Q. Do you have any drills for putting that can help with pace and speed distance control? I see different stimpmeter reads, different stimpmeter speeds, 10, 10.5, 11.5 mentioned, but don't get the exact drill applications, which can help me control pace. I appreciate the help. Yeah, so my favorite drill for controlling pace would be, where's my putter? the ladder drill. Very, very simple drill. So what you'll have is you'll have an object ball, right? So that'd be my object ball. And I would put your object ball about 20 feet away. And then I'd put a tee in the ground. Let's pretend like this box of balls is a tee. And all that's doing is marking your starting point. And then I would have a ball. And what I'm going to do, and you just pretend like this ball is like 20 feet away. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get this ball to be as close as possible to this ball without going past it, right? And the direction does not matter. You're only focusing on the speed, right? So if I hit it past it, I have to start the game over. If I hit it short of it, so here I'm going to give this a try, right? I'm going to try to get this to be as close to that without going past it. So that didn't go past it, right? So that's about that's biting off a little bit too much probably, but I'm going to count that because it did not go past it. It would have hit it had it been in line with it, but we're going to count that. So now I'm going to roll the other ball that I had back, and now my score is 1. So now I'm going to try to roll it up to that one without going past it. Right? So I left it about 3 inches short. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to take this one, right? And again, you pretend like this is like 20 feet away. Now, let's say I'm like 16 feet away, right? I'm just going to try to, not my best effort there, but it counts, right? And now I'm up to 3. And you can see how, if you start this at 20 feet, how it's it's getting harder and harder, right? Because I'm getting it. I'm doing a pretty good job of just leaving it just short. So now I think I'm up to 5. And you can see how when it gets really, really close, it's getting harder. Now I'm up to 6. So what I would do is I would just keep score, right? And then from there, just try to beat your score. Once it's over, just try to beat your score. It's really the best drill, kind of solo drill you can do to improve your speed control. If you're just looking for one drill to do. If you want to find more drills for speed control, I check out our Top Speed Golf putting system. There's more drills in there to help with that. But that ladder drill is in there. That's a really good one. But there's lots of other ones in there as well. So check it out. Click the house icon at the top of the page. That will take you to the homepage. If you scroll down the homepage, you'll see a list of all the courses. Click the Top Speed Golf putting system, and then you can go from there. All right. So Colin T says, I sometimes hit the ground before the ball with my short chips and my pitching wedge. Is it worth trying to look at the front of the ball rather than the back of the ball? It can certainly help. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to do it, right? But, golf is a game of adjusting your field to get the desired result that you want. So that's something you can certainly try. Focusing on the front of the ball can help you to get your low point more in front. The first thing I would do is I would check out our chipping mastery course and make sure that your setup is good. So just to talk about that real quickly, I would try to have your feet pretty close together. I see a lot of people when they're setting up for chips, they're kind of setting up like this, right? The feet are kind of farther apart. We don't want to do that because the farther our feet are apart, the more we're going to shift, right? And we don't want to shift our weight. We want to stay very centered for a chip, right? We don't need power, right? The whole reason why we would shift our weight is to create power in the golf swing, to create effortless power, right? We don't need power in a chip, right? So have your feet close together so that way you can stay more centered. And then I would just favor the lead side, ball position, more in the center of your stance, right? And then feel like you're keeping your biceps close to your body, right? So you're staying more connected. And then turn your body, right? So if you do that, and we don't need a lot of wrist action here. Just a little bit's fine. We don't need a lot of wrist action. The reason why we don't want that is we want to come in nice and shallow with the golf ball, right? If we come in more shallow, then we can kind of skim the club across the turf. If we come in more steeply, right, if we come in like that, then that leading edge is leading, and it's going to want to dig into the turf. If we come in really, really shallow, right, we again, feet close together, about a club head width apart, favor that lead side, have your elbows kind of more connected to your body, right? And then turn your body back and through. If you do that, you'll be a much better chipper. You'll come in much more shallow, and you'll develop a much better touch, right? And that's going to allow you can hit 3 inches behind the golf ball if you're doing that and still hit a good shot, right? Whereas if we kind of get here and then we kind of hinge the club up and then we drop it down, I'm not saying you're doing that, but it's just what I see a lot of people do. That leading edge gets into the ground. We really shouldn't be taking much of a divot when we're chipping, right? It should be just kind of brushing the turf because we can come in nice and shallow. So that would look something like this, right? I hit behind that golf ball probably 2 inches, and it still would have been a good chip, right? And that's because I'm coming in nice and shallow with it. So that's what I'd be working on. We talk about that in the chipping mastery course. So JP says, thanks, Q, no problem. John P says, I found the consistency cone in video 7.3 on the TSG site. I need to shallow more. Thanks again, Q. No problem. All right, cool. Yeah, if anybody's looking for the consistency cone stuff, thanks for letting me know because I wasn't sure exactly where that was either. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining me. Again, we will not have office hours tomorrow. We have a clinic tomorrow. We have some members coming in to work on getting some distance. So really excited for that. But unfortunately, I won't be able to make it to office hours since I'll be working with those folks coming in. So that'll be next week as well. We're doing each of the next couple weeks. So, but yeah. So if you're interested in coming in for a clinic, be on the lookout for emails that we'll send out. We plan on having several here in the fall, leading up to Christmas, probably after Christmas too. Not sure exactly. Don't have any scheduled then, but we definitely have some leading into Christmas. So if you're interested in coming in, getting some distance, if you're in a cold spot, wanting to get away from the cold weather, come to sunny Florida, then be on the lookout for those emails and come visit us. I'd love to have an opportunity to work with you, help you get more distance. All right. So thanks everybody for joining me. And we'll be back. I'll be back Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great weekend, everybody.